It is time for more creepy cupcakes. This is the original Clive. He is the first puppet I ever made, and I did a really bad job. I didn't take care of him. He's very much worse for wear. So this is Clive 2.0. This is the new cupcake that we're making to truly test whether my years of experience can mean that we can get a better Clive than this absolute monstrosity. Now, I have scaled up his body that we made in the first episode into this, and the next step is to add some little creepy arms to each side of his body. So join me today as we do exactly that. So because the original Clive is a bit of a marionette puppet here, I made him these little really weird, thin, flimsy arms with a little thing on the end. It was very slapdash and very quick, but I'm going to try and do it in this sort of similar style. A couple of disclaimers before we begin. Number one, you might see me covered in white paint, and that is because today a colleague and myself spilt 2 litres of white paint in a car park and we had to clean it up for about 3 hours. So if you see me covered in white paint, that is what it is. I can't get it off. And the second disclaimer is I use a mixture of very professional and incredibly unprofessional methods when making my puppets. If you see something that works good for you, fabulous. And if you see something that you can't stand, no worries. This is just how I do it. With that said, we're going to start here with this little guy, and I'm also going to take inspiration from the original Clive. I know that the arm I need to make has to be a tiny little bit longer than the arm I intend to show. It's kind of like when we make all of these here, I make them have longer arms so that we've got enough to stuff into the cavity to make sure it doesn't fall out. So this entire step for me is going to be pattern making. I'm not going off a pattern here. This is just from a mind's eye. My idea so far is this. I've got one smaller rectangle here that's going to be my foam insert, which I'm going to fold over into a cylinder. And then I've got my bigger rectangle here, which is going to be cut out of nylon fleece to go over the whole thing, and the stretch of the fabric is going to go across the arm. Just in case we don't get it long enough, I want to make sure that I've got enough to play with, if that makes sense. So we're going to make a cylinder of nylon fleece, inside of which we're going to have a rod of metal so that you can pose the arm to your heart's content. I'm just going to begin by drawing out my shapes onto their respective materials. For the people that hate the sound of my pen on the foam, skip. But for the people that love the sound, here you go. Are you ready for this? Try and get my microphone close to it so you can really enjoy the bounty. How was that? I feel like that wasn't as satisfying as it usually is, but I did my best. I've cut out my smaller rectangle and I'm now going to get my nylon fleece. This will be the same with basically any fabric you wish to use for your puppet, but you'll see that there's a stretch downward, but there's not a stretch across. I want to make sure that my rectangle is going across the stretch so that we can envelop that arm really nicely. So I've made sure that my fabric is stretchy along my rectangle, and I'm going to draw it out. It's important, by the way, when you are drawing your patterns out onto your fabrics that you leave a gap. It's called a seam line, I believe, and it is just to make sure that when you sew it up, you've still got all of the pattern that you intended to have and you're not using the pattern space to make your shape, if that makes any sense. As previously discussed, I am just leaving a small gap around my shape so that I've got room to sew it when the time comes. And now I've got my rectangle here and I've got this here. Don't worry about this for now, we just need this. The idea is now to sew it up inside out so that we can see the lines that we're working with into sort of a cylinder shape, and then we'll fold it outside in, and then after that we'll shove some foam inside there. We can kind of see that it's a little bit long, but bear in mind we will have a bit of length in him to keep it secure, so it will kind of be about that length, and I think that's going to look really good. I'm going to get some thread that best matches the colour of my nylon fleece and a little needle. Hello. So I've got my needle here, and the way I'm going to sew it together is I've got it inside out and I'm going to put my needle through each corner of the shape that I've drawn, making sure it's going through the corner on both sides of my shape and literally bringing my needle back out. I'm not doing any fancy or crazy stitch. I'm literally going in and out the entire way through. In and out, up and down, all the way along, and then I shall rejoin you. And we should have something like this. We've got a little arm here, and the next step is to chuck this in it. If you struggle to fit this in this little cylinder that we've made, you can just sew it around the edges so that it's already like pre-packaged as a cylinder shape, and it will take a little bit longer, but I'm going to fold it preemptively into the arm pocket pocket that we've made and shove it through as best I can. It's kind of like putting on a really inconvenient sock in some ways, just feeding it through the fabric. Because I have used foam, it's a really nice and smooth shape. But here is what we've got so far, and the next step is, that looks really strange. Anyway, sorry. So the next step is to make it poseable, and the way that we're going to do that is with our trusty wire here. This is jewellery wire. It's not too thick, which is really good, and it's also really nice and malleable. You can move it really easily, and you can also cut it really easily with just the average pair of pliers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the length, but I'm also going to add a little bit more on the end to factor in for the hand that we're going to add. Kind of measure the length of the arm and then the little bit extra that we need, and fold it over, bringing that length all the way down, rinsing and repeating that. And then I'm just going to get a little bit more, and I'm going to use this piece to kind of wrap around it to keep it nice and secure. The beauty of this wire is it is just so malleable and poseable, and anywhere that there might be sort of like a little sharp bit, I'm going to get my pliers and press that in so that it becomes a bit less of a threat and doesn't risk like poking through the arm in the future. If you were sewing up the foam before you put it in the arm, you could put it in now, but I see no issue with just putting it in as it is because it is quite strong. And bingo, you've got a poseable arm. Now the next step is to do the hands. I've taken for the hands direct inspiration from the original Clive. I kind of went for, you know, Mickey Mouse, he's got these big white gloves, these sort of cartoonish gloves. That's kind of what I went for when I made my original Clive. So I wanted to honour that and make something similar. So I've come up with a pattern, because this entire arm is just me coming up with a pattern. I haven't got anything. The way I made this pattern was I just drew a straight rectangle, and then I think I got my royal blue because it's one of the biggest spools I have, and I drew 3 circles the size of this, and that is going to look kind of just a better version of this basically. So I'm just going to do this but a bit neater, which becomes this. I've got some really nice ivory fleece here left over from when I made my dinosaur puppet Rex. Now if you are using polar fleece, which if you are in the UK you probably are, as it's much more readily available than Nyla fleece, you can see here that we've got a really smooth side and then we've got a bobbly side. Typically draw your patterns on the smooth side because we want that rough side to show. The rough side is usually the side that gets used with all the lovely textures and whatnot, and the smooth side is hidden away. So I'm going to draw my pattern twice onto the smooth side of my polar fleece, and hopefully this pattern that I've made will look as similar to this as possible, but in a better way. As I cut them out, remember we leave a gap, we leave a seam line gap, so I'm just going to cut those out. So we've got 2 of these kind of, I want to say club shapes here, and the next thing to do is put them back to back so that we've got those lines visible, and we're going to stitch them together. But I'm going to leave this bit at the bottom open so that we've got a place to stuff the stuffing when all is said and done. So I'm going to begin by stitching these together just as I did the arm, and I'll come back to you once that's done. And then we've got something like this, and I'm going to stuff it now, and I'm going to roll up a little bit of stuffing each time and use my Sharpie to shove it through. Then once it's in, I'm making sure that it really gets into every single crevice so that we don't have some bumpy bits and flat bits. And the reason I'm rolling it as well is just to make it a little bit more contained, which will make it a bit easier to actually get in there. So now it's stuffed, I've got this sort of strange shape, and I'm gonna shove it on top of this little extra bit of wire that I've got coming out here, just wiggling it in. But if we look at his actual hands, he's kind of got this little band that goes around it to signify that it is a glove. I'm just going to cut a long strip of it and fold it over so that I can put a little band around the edge of it, and then I'm going to place that band that I've made around this little hand. So I've come up with something like this. So we've got the band of the glove and then the actual glove above it. I think it looks as similar as I could get it to the original. And now I'm going to sew. I'm not going to go the whole way around, but I'm just going to do little pokes and prods here and there, and then at the back that's where I'm going to stitch it down the line. So we've got all of this here nicely set in its way. So you've got the seam on the back of the arm, and then on the front of the arm it's seam free. Okay, so here is the arm. I've got this little band around the edge, and then I've got this weird funky shape and a poseable arm fixture, which is really nice. And now is the time to make another one and then we're going to attach it into this cupcake here. Now luckily I've done a bit of a Blue Peter and I've got this one all ready to go. So we're going to begin by kind of doing what I like to do for my eyes and other orifices, is that I stab a hole into the area of choice and then I shove it through and sew around the edges. So that is what we're going to do today. I think I'm going to go, because bear in mind he's going to have, I can't remember what they're called, it's been a long time since I've had a cupcake, but you know those like little jackets they sit in, like, you know, the little cupcake wrappers, those little things that they sit in. So I want to make his arms pretty high up so that they don't interfere with that when the time comes. I think I'm going to go right under his jawline here into this area and have it be out like this, so he's kind of a bit like that. So the technique that I've come up with currently is to just make a hole, kind of like a cross shape, start off with a cross shape, into the fabric and then into the inside support as well. And then I'm going to get my arm and I'm going to push it through that little cross that I've made. If you make a circle and you get the sizing wrong, you're absolutely kind of going to see where you go, whereas when you make a cross, each bit that you've left kind of acts like a flap. So if you have got it oversized, it's okay, because those little bits of the crosses kind of fold back out, so you can't see that you've cut a hole in it quite as much as if you were to cut a hole in it, you know what I mean? And I'm going to have a look at the length of the arm that I want. Okay, and now we've done that, I'm going to put a hole in the other side so that I can get the other arm in, and then I'm going to stitch around them, and that should be good to go. So once again, I'm just measuring where I've been, and luckily I haven't put a bottom on him yet, so I can just go in. I'm thinking this kind of length, just to kind of like that, and it can sit really nicely on top of the little cupcake thing that we're going to make for him in the future. I know he might not look quite like a cupcake right now, but I ask you to bear with the process, because in a few weeks time he is going to very much look like a cupcake. You've got to think, once he's got his little jacket on and then he's got the whipped cream and the candle, it's going to change everything. I'm going to stitch those holes shut so that our arms are really nice and safely locked inside their cavities. Okay, and there we go. This is what this creepy little fella looks like with arms of his own. As you can see, they are poseable, so we can make him move in any which way that we want. I think they are absolutely terrifying. He almost looks like he can crawl on his hands in the night and chase you. That's kind of the vibe that he's giving. Absolutely deranged little thing. He's gonna look so good with all his accoutrements. I'm genuinely so pleased with that. I mean, I know I said it before, but it is truly night and day how different in style and skill they both are. I'm so pleased with how he turned. I'm so pleased with how he's turning out, and I hope you are enjoying it as well. If you did enjoy yourself today in any way, please hit that subscribe button and ring that bell so that you can be told when we next make another episode. We've got loads more going on. We've just finished Dr. Cecil here, and we're also making Betsy, our gardener puppet, up there. I really hope you've enjoyed this week. I certainly have. He is getting more deranged by the day. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next one. Goodbye.